In Woodsboro, Scott and his girlfriend Madison arrive at a notorious house. Many years ago, a series of murders happened there, and now it has become an attraction. People can rent it to spend the weekend and admire the decorations representing the crimes. Scott is a huge fan, so he is taking dozens of pictures, but Madison is bored. They separate when she goes to the bathroom. A few minutes later, Madison comes out and cannot find Scott. She searches every room and turns on the lights, only to be startled by the legendary killer Ghostface. She screams and runs until she bumps into Scott. After telling him what happened, Scott goes into the room and finds Ghostface, but it is just a doll with a motion sensor. Nearby, there is a small memorial shrine for Stu, who was one of the people behind the original Ghostface. He was killed by having a television thrown on his head, but some people theorize that he is still alive. Then the house phone rings, and Scott runs to answer it because it is part of the experience. He answers scary questions, but when he gives one wrong answer, he hangs up. After Scott goes to the bathroom, Madison gets a call on her cell phone. A terrifying voice tells her, "You are going to die," and she plays along because she thinks it is part of the game. When the voice insults her, she complains, and the call ends. Then Madison hears a noise, so she goes to another room to check, causing the Ghostface doll to activate again. This time it is saying different things, so Madison looks closer and waves her hand to check the motion sensor. Then she hits the mask and insults it. When she turns around, she is startled to see Ghostface, causing her to scream and punch it. However, it is just Scott trying to scare her. Just then, Scott sees that the doll moved differently. When he approaches, Ghostface reveals that he is real and jumps on Scott, stabbing him multiple times. After Scott falls dead, Madison throws a decoration at the killer and runs away. Ghostface takes a shortcut through another room and appears in front of her, knocks over a table, then approaches, grabs her by the hair, and throws her down the stairs. Madison tries to crawl away, but Ghostface grabs her leg to drag her down and bangs her head against the railing. After some struggle, Madison manages to free herself and runs upstairs, ripping a lamp from the wall, which she uses to hit Ghostface. After kicking him, she tries to run away, but soon he is attacking her again. As she tries to defend herself, she kicks the wall and manages to push both of them over the railing. Madison grabs the lamp, but Ghostface falls. Swinging the lamp, Madison puts her legs over the railing only to slip and fall. Ghostface holds his knife up and waits, and she falls onto him, getting stabbed in the stomach. Barely conscious, Madison watches Ghostface set the house on fire, then he pours gas on her and sets her on fire too, then leaves. In Pine Grove, Tatum is busy on her phone when she suddenly hears a noise. She looks out the window and is startled by a presence, but it is her boyfriend Ben. The couple falls onto the bed to get intimate, only to be interrupted by a knock on the door. Tatum pushes Ben off before her mother Sydney comes in. She immediately sees Ben failing to hide and kicks him out. Then Tatum argues with Sydney because she is overprotective. Sydney is a survivor of a Ghostface killing spree and wants her daughter to learn from her mistakes, but Tatum just thinks her mother is a hypocrite. Then Sydney turns on the alarm system and goes to her room to get intimate with her husband Mark. The next morning, Mark checks the ongoing construction in his garage before work. Meanwhile, Sydney goes to her cafe and prepares an order for Lucas, who mentions the documentary he watched last night about Ghostface and asks Sydney to come on his podcast. He is interrupted by his mother, Jessica, who apologizes for her son's behavior. Then Sydney makes an order for Carl, who looks extremely scary and does not say a word. During her break, Sydney asks Jessica for advice. How to handle a teenager. Jessica explains, "It is a dangerous world and our children need to learn to protect themselves." She also shares, "My husband was abusive, so I left him and now I'm raising Lucas alone." At school, Tatum has to wear a dog costume for a drama rehearsal. She stumbles while climbing onto the stage, accidentally pushing the lead actress Hannah, who is hanging from the ceiling at that moment. Erin is controlling her harness and tries to stabilize her, but ends up getting her stuck on the set. Mr. George tells Hannah, "You and Erin need to practice more with the harness." Then he tells Tatum, "Bring more strength to your role and channel your mother's fire." At the cafe, Sydney gets a call from a terrifying voice claiming to be Ghostface. She thinks it is just a prank and records the call to report it later. The voice assures her it is real and starts a video call. To Sydney's shock, Stu's deformed face appears. He knows about her daughter and moves the camera to reveal that he is outside the school, saying, "I am going to attack." Sydney gets in her car and races toward the school while calling her husband, who is also the police chief. At school, Hannah and Erin continue practicing with the harness on stage. However, Erin gets distracted by some noises. After a few minutes, Hannah panics because Erin is no longer responding. Suddenly, the lights go out and only a very bright light is focused on her. Then the harness starts acting crazy, throwing Hannah around. As she screams for help, Ghostface appears on stage and watches Hannah swing. Whenever she comes close enough, Ghostface cuts her with his knife. For his final move, Ghostface raises his knife and lets her swing onto it, splitting her torso open, killing her instantly. Then Sydney arrives and insults Ghostface before firing her gun. He runs away, so Sydney tries to chase him while the police run toward the exits. Backstage, Sydney finds Erin's body and shouts her daughter's name, worried that she might also be dead. Just then, Tatum appears behind her and Sydney hugs her, pulling her away so she does not see the bodies. After this, the police question George and all the members of the theater club. Mark says, "The killer is someone who knows the layout here, and it cannot be Stu because he is dead." The killer most likely used deepfake technology, so the police lab will analyze the recording of the video call. Sydney then takes her daughter home but does not let Ben come inside, which makes Tatum angry. At home, the police check every window and door before letting the family inside. However, they do not check the attic, so after the police leave, Ghostface jumps out of it. In the bedroom, Sydney starts packing her things so they can move, and Tatum complains because she does not want to leave her friends. When Sydney goes into her bedroom, she asks Mark, "Why did you turn off the lights?" But he says, "I didn't." Suddenly, another light goes out, so the couple goes to look for their daughter, only to find that she has been taken hostage by Ghostface. When Mark puts his gun down, Ghostface kicks it away. Then Mark tells Tatum to move and jumps to take Ghostface down. The men start fighting and Ghostface manages to bite Mark's arm before they struggle over the gun, accidentally shooting a hole in the wall. When the knife falls, Sydney kicks it toward Mark before she starts beating Ghostface. Mark tries to take control of the fight, only for Ghostface to push him down the stairs. Since Mark is now unconscious, Sydney and Tatum run toward the bedroom. Sydney moves her shoe rack to reveal a hidden panic room behind it. When Ghostface tries to chase them, Sydney knocks him down with a bat and closes the door. Ghostface starts banging on it, but it is thick steel and does not even budge. Then Sydney shows Tatum the panic room has a secret passage. So they start going through it to try to save Mark. Ghostface realizes he cannot open the door and is about to leave when he hears noise behind the walls. The women freeze and stay quiet as Ghostface starts tapping on the wall and finally stabs through it. They both scream and try to move as fast as they can as Ghostface keeps stabbing through the wall repeatedly. When the knife comes close to Sydney, she hits it with the bat, bending and trapping it. However, Ghostface picks up a fire poker and keeps trying, cutting Sydney's arm in the process. While the women reach the end of the tunnel, Ghostface looks for Mark near the stairs, but the body is gone. As the two come out of the house, Mark grabs Ghostface from behind, and they start fighting again in the front yard. Sydney breaks a birdhouse over Ghostface's back, and Mark sends him rolling down the yard. Ghostface ends up in the middle of the road and gets run over by a car, which kills him instantly. The car is being driven by Gail, another survivor of the past Ghostface massacres. She is a journalist, and her assistants are the twins Mindy and Chad. They are also Ghostface survivors and are related to a previous victim. After Gail reunites with Sydney, it is time to reveal Ghostface's identity. A police officer removes the mask, but no one knows who this man is. Sydney recognizes him as Carl from the coffee shop, but she knows nothing about him. This is strange because Ghostface is usually someone close to the victims. After the police close off the area, they search for information about Carl and find out he escaped from a psychiatric hospital 2 weeks ago. He was locked up for a triple murder. Sydney still thinks, that was too easy, and explains there are always two people behind Ghostface. When she looks at the curious crowd gathering around the police tape, she spots George and Ben. As the family returns home, they are contacted by their neighbors, Lucas and Jessica, who want to offer their sympathies. Gail suspects Lucas because he has such an interest in true crime and Ghostface cases. So Jessica defends her son and tells Gail to back off. While drinking some coffee, Gail explains to Sydney she came to town after hearing about the murders at the Woodsboro house. Just then, she gets another video call from Stu, who is happy to see Gail and promises to kill both of them. After Stu hangs up, Sydney realizes this won't stop until we do something, so she agrees to help Gail investigate. The next day, Sydney and Gail receive a call from the police, who tell them, there is no intake record of Stu's body in the system. The coroner from that year is already dead, so there is no one to ask either. Sydney theorizes, someone stole the paperwork to make it look like the body never reached the morgue. At the psychiatric hospital, the two women speak with Supervisor Marco and convince him to show them Carl's room under the pretext of covering the story for TV. Marco explains, the police searched the room last night and Carl was a very violent person. They find very scary drawings on Carl's wall, but Marco says he never showed any interest in Sydney or the Ghostface stories. Then Sydney shows him a screenshot of Stu's call, and Marco immediately recognizes him as a nameless patient who arrived at the hospital 16 years ago. He was amnesiac due to a blow to the head and had attacked a girl while wandering the streets. The court declared him incompetent and sent him to the hospital, but he was released 2 days ago. Marco also confirms Stu was a very close friend of Carl. After this, Sydney gets another call from the police who inform her they have set up everything to track Stu whenever he calls again. Gail does not want to wait and says we need to bait him, so Sydney agrees to appear on her show. Back home, Mindy sees Lucas working on his yard, but repeatedly glancing over at Sydney's place, which she finds suspicious. Chad checks the security cameras but cannot find the moment when Ghostface broke in, so he theorizes the footage was hacked. Tatum asks the twins, why did you come back after going through so much? so they explain, "It is our duty." She understands them and wants to help too. A few moments later, Mark hears noise in the construction area and goes to check. He finds some tools on the floor and picks them up, unaware that Ghostface is hiding behind him. After closing the garage door, Mark turns off the lights, and Ghostface takes the chance to attack him. He wraps Mark in a plastic curtain and stabs him multiple times. In the evening, the twins ask Tatum to gather her close friends at a bar to discuss theories. Tatum also gives Ben a copy of Stu's call, which she found in Sydney's cloud. Ben analyzes the face but cannot find any inconsistencies, so if it is fake, it is very good. Then Mindy starts looking for a murder motive among Tatum's friends. Ben is angry that Sydney does not approve of him. Lucas is obsessed with the Ghostface case and Chloe hates boredom. They all deny being the killer. Meanwhile, Gail's show begins, and she interviews Sydney to share with the public what is happening. The children watch the show at the bar. Sydney asks the killer to call her because she wants to know what he wants, and Gail tries to provoke him by calling him a chicken, but the call never comes. The interview continues, and Gail asks Sydney about her family. Sydney refuses to talk about her child, but Gail keeps asking, wondering, is Sydney afraid of passing her trauma to Tatum? Sydney gets angry and leaves, so Gail has to cut the show short. After this, Gail tells Sydney, "That was unfair." Sydney thinks, what would her friend do if she had asked invasive questions? So Gail swears, she is fine. However, she keeps taking medicine for her state of mind. At the bar, Tatum says she wants to stay with her mother, so Ben agrees to drive her to the station. After the broadcast ends, Sydney finally gets a call from Stu, who tells her he is at the bar with her daughter. Sydney says, that is impossible. So Stu explains Tatum sneaked out, which explains the open garage door. Gail tells her team to call the police, while Sydney runs out of the building. She keeps calling Mark, but with no luck. Outside the bar, Tatum gets into Ben's car and finds his computer. To her shock, she finds software that he was using to create a deep fake of Stu over his own face. Ben says he was just playing with it. But Tatum does not believe him, so she hits him with the laptop and gets out of the car. Unfortunately, Ghostface is already waiting for her, so she runs in the opposite direction. At the bar, Chad and Mindy realize they should not have left Tatum alone, so they try to go after her. Since the front door is locked, they go looking for another exit. In the kitchen, Chloe is getting rid of a burned pizza when suddenly the lights go out. When she turns around, she sees Ghostface, so she tries to run away, but he keeps blocking her path. Chloe then grabs a kitchen mace and tries to defend herself, but Ghostface keeps throwing her around and slamming her against furniture. The knife falls during the struggle, so Chloe picks it up. When she feels someone near her, she immediately attacks, only to find that she has stabbed Chad. Ghostface appears behind her, takes back his knife, and knocks her down. Then Mindy tries to attack Ghostface, so he cuts her stomach, and she also falls. Chloe hits Ghostface to distract him, and runs back into the bar, where she tries to tell Lucas to run away. However, Lucas enters the kitchen anyway. After a few seconds of silence, a bleeding Lucas is pushed out. Chloe hears Ghostface coming, so she hides behind the bar, and somehow Ghostface does not see her when he peeks. Then the sound of a door opening and closing is heard, so Chloe decides to come out. However, it is a trap, and Ghostface quickly grabs her. He slams her head on the bar before shoving her body into a pile of glasses. The shards cut her easily, killing her. Lucas tries to crawl away, but Ghostface drags him back and impales him on a beer tap, causing him to vomit alcohol mixed with blood. Just then, Tatum stops running to catch her breath, only to find that Ghostface is nearby. She tries to go to the nearest store, but the door is locked and no one answers her screams. Then she grabs a sign and waits until Ghostface comes to kill her. She keeps running down the street, begging for help. However, no one comes out, so she hides behind a flower kiosk. While keeping an eye on Ghostface, Tatum gets startled by something behind her, but it is just Ben. He insists he is not the killer, and Tatum apologizes, assuring him she knows better now. This sweet moment is interrupted when Ghostface attacks Ben from behind. Ben fails to defend himself, and Ghostface stabs him multiple times. A furious Tatum pushes Ghostface into a store, breaking the window. Then she checks on Ben, but he is already dead. She has no choice but to keep running, and she reaches her mother's cafe. Since she knows the lock's password, she manages to hide inside. This sends an alert to Sydney's phone. When Ghostface reaches the cafe, he finds the door locked and decides to leave. However, he freezes when he hears Tatum's phone. She quickly cancels the call and waits until Ghostface leaves, then sends a text to Sydney explaining what is happening. Sydney tells her there is a gun in the office, so Tatum comes out of her hiding spot. Just then, Ghostface returns with the password and opens the door to chase Tatum. She runs toward the office and blocks the door with furniture. Sydney watches this all on the security camera and calls her daughter to give her the safe code. Once Tatum pulls out the gun, Sydney teaches her how to turn off the safety. When Tatum starts to break down, Sydney gives her a speech about survival and says she is just like her. As Ghostface walks away from the door, Sydney tells Tatum to shoot through the wall. The bullets go through the wall and finally knock Ghostface down. Tatum comes out, and Sydney tells her to shoot him in the head to be extra sure, but Ghostface reacts quickly and starts fighting Tatum for the gun before throwing her onto a table. Tatum grabs a fire extinguisher and hits Ghostface on the head to knock him down again, but when she tries to run away, he grabs her leg, causing her to fall. A desperate Tatum hits him with some chairs and knocks him onto a table. Now Tatum can finally leave. However, she is startled to see another Ghostface at the door. Both killers jump together to surround her as she screams. A few minutes later, Sydney arrives at the cafe and only finds the gun. Then she gets a call from Ghostface who says he will not kill Tatum until Sydney is home to watch it. Sydney runs back to her house and finds all the screens playing clips of Stu. He confirms he is not real, and his face starts changing into previous victims and other killers who also use the Ghostface mask. Eventually, Sydney finds Tatum tied to a chair in the backyard with Ghostface, who takes off his mask to reveal that he is Marco. He also calls Stu by name and the other Ghostface appears behind him. Marco then brings Mark from the garage and kicks him to confirm that he is still alive. The other Ghostface also decides to take off his mask, and Sydney is shocked to see Jessica. Marco confirms Stu is still dead and explains he worked as a Google security specialist, so he has a lot of computer knowledge. Sydney begs for mercy and Jessica mocks her, saying that is not like her. Jessica explains, years ago, she lived a miserable life with her abusive husband until she read Sydney's biography. It inspired her to get rid of bad people, so she killed her husband and let Lucas think that he had left them. As she talks, Mark slowly pulls a knife from his pocket. Jessica gets angry as she continues her speech, saying, Sydney disappointed her. Jessica says, when Sydney disappeared from the public eye, she was not part of the Ghostface attacks in New York, and Jessica thinks there cannot be a Ghostface story without her. Jessica says, seeing her hero hide instead of fight caused her to break down so much that she checked herself into a psychiatric hospital where she met Marco and Carl. While Mark carefully cuts the tape on his daughter's ankles, Jessica says, she will force Tatum to watch her mother die, just like Sydney did to continue the cycle. Sydney sees what her husband is doing and nods as a signal, so Tatum headbutts Jessica and Sydney shoots Marco in the head. Tatum also breaks a chair over Jessica, who pushes her away before running off. Sydney chases Jessica into the construction area and finds an abandoned Ghostface costume. Jessica whispers Sydney's name before turning on a very loud radio. When Sydney goes to turn it off, Jessica grabs her and the women start fighting on the floor. Sydney stabs Jessica's leg with a screwdriver and Jessica tries to choke her with a cable. The closeness allows Sydney to retrieve the screwdriver and stab Jessica multiple times before pushing her away. When Jessica counterattacks, Tatum appears to shoot her. Tatum then helps her mother up, only to turn and find Jessica gone. Within just a few seconds, Jessica tries to attack again, so mother and daughter shoot her together. This time, they kill her for good. After this, the police and reporters surround the house. The twins are wounded but alive, so Gail wants them to work anyway. After Mark is taken away by an ambulance, Sydney apologizes to Gail for not being with her in New York, and they reconcile with a hug. Then Sydney talks with Tatum and finally opens up about what happened to her, explaining she named her daughter after her late best friend because of how strong she was. After sharing a hug and words of love, they head to the hospital together. So friends, I hope you liked this video. If you liked the video, then like, share, and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video. Till then, bye.